Hey everyone, it is your boy Larry Howard, Coach Larry Howard, also known as Coach Proof, Director of Strength and Conditioning here at DePaul University, and we have another episode of the AAPCA podcast. Today we have John Griffin. He is the Director of Player Performance for the Atlanta Falcons. He's a very decorated coach. He came via the Rams. He's done some time at Baylor. He's also had some time working with South Carolina, and he used to actually play football for the New York Jets. So I have the privilege of having one of the top minds in this space on this call. John, how you doing, my guy?
I'm good, man. You said a lot of great things about me, and I appreciate that, dog. I really do.
I try to hype everybody. I want to make sure everybody knows, like, man, we're getting some really great people in here to talk to us, to give up their time, to basically share their experiences, share best practices, and all these things, with our APCA podcast and the APCA audience.
I'm
So,
I'm
John,
appreciative
I'm going to ask you, man, how are
considering.
things going? I mean, I know we're getting closer to playoffs, the NFL. How have you been doing? How are you managing? I mean, I know it's a lot right now because I mean, I could tell you just as a college strength and conditioning coach, if you're playing in December, you're managing a whole lot more when it comes to health, when it comes to a lot of things,
Yeah.
when it comes even your schedule. We just did a playoff run and you work in 7-day work weeks because of the fact that it's just so much more that's required of you at this time of year. How are you doing?
Doing well, man. I think everything you said is spot on. This is definitely what we'd call kind of a chaotic time in our schedule, but you kind of find calm in the chaos, especially if, in my opinion, if you love what you do, this is where you thrive. It's finding out solutions on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis, and this is when everybody gets rolling, when the pressure gets kind of pent up. This is the when you say you want to do this, that you want to be invited to, like this is the space you want to operate in. So for me, it's awesome. It's a privilege. I love being in these moments. I love pressure. I love chaos. So it's been going well so far.
Gotcha. I want to get a little bit of your backstory. I mean, obviously, we went into your time. You were running back. Obviously, played for the Jets. You had some time working in different places. Walk me through like what led you to where you are today. What made you decide? You know what, player performance is the route I want to go. You know, how did you get to where we're at?
Yeah, I would say kind of coming up, even in my playing day, I always had a liking for let's call it the process of preparing to play football, whether it was training with the guys, the camaraderie of going to run at the track or being on the hill or lifting in, whoever buddy's basement. I always kind of gravitated towards that, and that was always it was always fun for me. Even though it was a necessity to prepare for the season, for some guys that's a drag. For some guys, it's like, hey, I just want to hurry up and get to the game, and I wanted to get to football, and I know this is something I got to do, but I don't necessarily want to do it. For me, I always felt like that was like the most entertaining and the funnest part of the whole journey was the preparation portion of it. So I knew that when I was done playing, whenever that time came, that I would always kind of go back to that. And whether it was just a way of my lifestyle in terms of how I like to train, or it's like, hey, maybe I can make a profession of this. At the time, it was a little muddy. You don't know, like, hey, do I want to go into professional training? Do I want to try to go the entrepreneur route? Do I want to try to get in a collegiate or professional setting? And you don't really have clarity on what you want to do. Slowly but surely, you start networking and some opportunities come your way. And an internship at Baylor kind of fell in my lap. And I would say that internship really is what changed the trajectory of my professional career from wanting to basically be in the training side of things to understanding the unique space of the performance world. And I got to give a hats off to everyone that was there. Kaz Kazadi at the time was the director. Chris Roof, Andrew Altoff, Keith Tate, and Josh Nelson were all people there that I learned from that truly taught me what a performance space looked like. And I thought that was so intriguing. I've always kind of had like call it a nerd disposition when it comes to like the sports science and the training, and then like being in there kind of lit it on fire. Like there's so much I don't know, which at the time was humbling. It was a little scary at first too, but it was also exciting that like I'm kind of learning a whole new profession. And I kind of just dedicated myself over, let's call it the next 3 to 4 years, to just being a sponge of everyone around me, everyone I met, whether I worked with them directly or indirectly, or podcasts like the one I'm on. I was just downloading information. I was taking notes in my Moleskin. I was putting stuff in my phone. I was shooting DMs to coaches like, "Hey, you got a chance to grab a cup of coffee? Can I talk to you at conference?" And I would say I was just a sponge for the next 3 to 5 years of just learning as much as I possibly could until I developed at a requisite level of confidence in this space to kind of take what I've learned, make it my own, and kind of go my own route with it.
Gotcha, gotcha. Um, I know you mentioned mentors. I know you mentioned a lot of different people that have molded. Out of the people that you've mentioned, who would you say has molded you the most? And I'm going to use myself as an example. Shout out to Zach Woodfin. That's my guy. He's the guy. He kind of molded me in my time when I was working in the USFL with him in terms of like how my mindset works when it comes to how I approach performance. I think in that experience, I transitioned from what you would call a strength coach to a performance coach because your spectrum is much broader when it comes to the ecosystem of an athlete's health.
Yep.
Who would you say was that person for you, and how does that how has your framework been molded to what you bring to the Falcons?
Yeah, I would definitely go back to my time early on with Coach Kaz. I would say he definitely transitioned to me. I would say going from athlete to strength coach was a bigger transition for me than strength coach to, you take your words, performance coach. The reason being is I think you have all the confidence along with the ignorance in the world as a professional athlete of like knowing everything and being confident about everything. And you feel like you know, but you really don't know. And being around, Coach Kaz, he really taught me how to kind of get that professional athlete stain off of and start this new journey as a strength coach. And I feel like I truly had the most development in my life, career wise, being underneath that staff. And it wasn't even just, I'll say, programming or X's and O's. It was how to move in the building, how to dress. Every interaction is an interview. You don't get a second chance at a first impression. Having your pitch ready, prepare yourself and operate on a day-to-day basis for the job you want, not the job you have. Have your plan together. What's your elevator pitch? Like all these things as an intern, I was challenged with and really felt like it kind of helped put me in a position to be mentally in the job I'm in now, a lot of years prior to me actually taking it. So I would say just in terms of growth and development, that was the biggest step for me as a professional. I was working for Coach Kaz and his staff.
Awesome, awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the transition from college. I mean, you were obviously an intern and you had an opportunity to, work in that space, show leadership in that space, and then you transitioned to the Rams. Talk to me about that transition. A lot of coaches look to make that transition and want to, but it's not always easy because there's many different factors, obviously, who you know, how you carry yourself, your work speaks for itself. There are multiple factors that affect that. So, what were those factors for you, and how did you transition from moving from a college to that professional setting?
Yeah. There were pros and cons. I think, being in college helped. You get comfortable with group coaching. You'd have times in college where you're running a morning run with 130 guys and you got to figure out what does an hour look like with 130 guys, that it's clean, efficient work. Everybody understands what you're trying to execute and everything's smooth. Where sometimes you get to NFL, if you're coaching a position group, you may have in season 6 guys. So you go from, I can run a group of 130 to now I'm running a group of 6. It allows you to be a lot more intricate, almost like a NBA space where I have my team within a team. The one biggest change from college to the NFL, I think for most coaches is there's a lot more, let's call it conversations that occur versus communication in college. And what I mean by that is in college, it's a lot more of like, hey, here's what we got. This is what we are doing. Okay, go. And there's not really much bandwidth for what we're going to do. In the NFL, there's a lot more conversations that are had prior to making up the plan. How are you feeling today? What's going on with the knee? You just had a baby coming off this game, discussions with the agent and the organization. There's a huge presence of having conversations before, after that are forever ongoing throughout the year to get the best out of an athlete that you're working with. So I feel like that was the biggest jump. I've always felt like I did well as it relates to having conversations, communication, and building a relationship with athletes. So that wasn't a struggle for me. But I think there definitely is a line if that doesn't come natural or organic for you as a coach, that's going to be a difficult jump because there's so much autonomy in the NFL. You're more of a resource for these guys rather than a dictatorship where you're telling them what to do. They have so many opportunities within the offseason to train other places. They don't have to train with you. In season, they don't necessarily have to do what you're asking them to do. A lot of times these guys make significantly more money than any coach or staff in the building. And a lot of times, these guys have years under their belt, 5, 6, 10 years where they've had the opportunity to work with really bright coaches in the offseason. Hey, my guy Larry said this is what I should be doing. Or I went to LA this offseason and I was down there at this. And, I talked to them, or I was at Altus and they said this. So a lot of these guys have a framework that's not too far off of what they need to be doing and what's good for them. So there's a big presence of like, let's make sure that we're having conversations. You're educating your athletes on what you're doing. You have buy-in, and they trust that whatever you're putting forward is with their best intent in mind.
It's interesting you talk about that because I think what I'm seeing, at least, and I don't necessarily deal with it quite as much at the D3 level, but with NIL and the transfer portal and how quickly a lot of our athletes are now growing up.
Yeah.
I'm starting to notice shifts in that, in terms of the way that athletes are coached, in terms of the ability to be able to have conversations, especially as you get deeper in the season, and you notice that certain people are dealing with certain things. If you have guys that are working with specialists, you're seeing a lot more of that now due to the fact that there is an influx of money being involved in college sports now that was not necessarily there before. So I think it's very interesting that you brought that up. I'm curious to see how that transition's going to look, what that transition is going to look like now, because the lines are blurred now in terms of professional, because we're not just talking about you're going pro. No, you're a pro now.
Yep.
So those are things that I've been seeing, and I just think it's very interesting to talk about making that transition and being able to understand those dynamics.
I think one of two things is either going to have to occur. Either you're going to have a reputation in the game where athletes automatically have a respect for the play calls that you're making based off your reputation or what other people are saying about you, or you're going to have to develop deep intrinsic relationships with guys that they know you're not just a transactional piece around them that's asking them what to do, having a why for why they're doing what they're doing. Hey, why are we going a unilateral movement versus a bilateral movement today? Why are we going hip hinge versus a knee dominant hamstring? What is this? How is this helping me? That, I don't like how this feels. Why? And giving them an explanation. I think there's a huge presence in knowing your stuff and being able to articulate that to the athlete more so than ever nowadays.
Yeah, that's great news. Great. I mean, I agree with it. I think that, we came from a culture where it was athletes don't need to necessarily know the science. But now I do believe that there are times where if you are able to educate them on why we're doing this testing, if I put them on a force deck, if I want them to do a NORD board a day or two after a game, just to try to monitor what's going on, being able to get their buy-in so that they understand, like, hey, this is what we're looking at. This is what we're monitoring so that we can make sure we keep you operating at an efficient level, but also keep you on the field.
Yep. Yep.
Let's get into your transition. I mean, I know you have a family.
Yep.
How has that been moving around? Your experience, I mean, I don't want to get too personal, but I know that this is something that a lot of coaches coming into this don't always understand, that, in this game, you do have to kind of move around. You have to be very fluid.
Yep. Yep. I'll say it's very intuitive for me living in that space. I grew up military family. My dad was in the Marines, Air Force, kind of just moved up the chain once you got into the business world. So I've actually never lived anywhere longer than 3 years, whether that be as a child, as an adult, in college, NFL, as a coach. I've never lived in one area longer than 3 years. It's never seemed weird to me. It's just something I've always been used to. Just meeting new faces, being in new places, understanding new languages and jargon. So I'm pretty used to it at this point. With that said, I obviously do seek continuity in one place and would love for that to happen. I'm very ambitious in terms of goals that I set out for myself and standards that I set out for myself. And I think that's what kind of led me to Atlanta from LA. I did love my time in LA and had a lot of fun there. But, I know that's definitely something that is challenging for a lot of people. I would say it hasn't been as challenging for me just based off my background.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So you made the transition. We talked about the jump from college to
Yep.
pro to working in NFL in that sense. Talk to me about the transition from working on staff to being the director.
Yep.
I can tell you that I know building a program is different from being a part of a program or coming into a program. How did you go about establishing your program at in Atlanta, finding your team, making sure that the buy-in was there from the organization, the coaches, the different staff that you have to work with? Obviously, you work with nutrition, you work in dietetics, you work with sports medicine. Walk me through how you made that transition.
Yeah, I think kind of goes back to earlier the question you had asked about where I had the most growth in my career. And it was like understanding and living on a day to day basis in the job that you want, not necessarily a job that you have. So I feel like for the last, I'll call it 5 or 6 years, I've been operating in a capacity at work where my understanding of where I'm at is with the proxy of like, how does this fit with that? How does the dietitian fit with this? How does the sports science fit? Strength and conditioning, what does it look like? And I had kind of a loose blueprint skeleton in my head of, if I had an opportunity to build this thing from scratch, what would the org chart look like? Top to bottom, just on a blank canvas, what does it look like? Best case scenario where, hey, money's not an issue. What do you need? Middle case scenario, this is more believable. And then skeleton crew, we don't have it yet, but we'll get there. Provide all three of those, be able to put all three of those on paper, speak with conviction of what it looks like, understand the salary for each one of those, understand the lanes of growth for each one of those, what it looks like, and then being able to present that to somebody. I think having conviction, having confidence, and putting things on paper goes a long way rather than just kind of saying words. Coming into the space that I'm at, I had a fortunate ability to interview and say, hey, talk to me about your vision. What does this look like? And that's a question that I was inviting because in my head, I was like, great, this is exactly what it looks like. Best case scenario here, middle case scenario here. If we're not there yet, we can get away with a minimum threshold of this with a 3-year trajectory to eventually get to one of these. So I think just being in the positions that I was as a coach and taking pieces from each place that I was at, I would say the LA did a lot. Reggie Scott, he's their vice president of performance and health. Learned a ton from him as it relates to the NFL space, but just kind of taking my time from college and the NFL and just every single year putting together basically what I would call like a blueprint of like, what does this look like? I'm not in that seat now, but if I was tomorrow, would it be overwhelming? Would it catch me off guard? Would there be questions that I cannot answer? And if so, go get the answers for those right now before the call comes.
Gotcha. Okay. Walk me through what your organization looks like now in terms of your team.
Yep. Yep. So obviously we have our GM who we all report to. Underneath that, we're going to have strength and conditioning, performance science. So that's pretty much the lane that I operate in right now with my staff. As a proxy to that, we're going to have medicine, athletic medicine, obviously nutrition. And then we just most recently built our return to play staff. Now our return to play staff is kind of like a joint venture with athletic medicine and then one of our strength and conditioning coaches being like in stage return to play to kind of fit that continuum. But that's been something that has been built out over the last 2 years. It's an ongoing process. It's a work in progress. Obviously, interdisciplinary collaboration is the goal that we're all looking for here. But just trying to galvanize roles and responsibilities and make sure like, hey, are we all rowing in the same direction? Do we all have the same values? Do we all have the same goals as they relate to like organization and like why we're here, what we're here for? So that's been something we've been putting together the last couple of years.
So you've had a chance to basically build out the performance science piece. We're seeing that now. I know a lot of places they'll have a speed coach. They'll have someone who's really running most of their performance science metrics
Yep.
in terms of, sports scientists. And then you might have some people that are working with different position groups. I'm assuming that's similar to how you work.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in dual roles, man. I truly am. I don't like silos. I
Okay.
don't like when someone bottlenecks information. I'm a big believer in dual roles, and I'm a big believer of everyone on staff in some shape or form having proximity to other areas. So even though we have a director of sports science, our assistant director of sports science was a director at the place he came from. One of our strength coaches was a director of sports science at the place he came from. Technically, neither of those guys are the director of sports science, but when our idea is pitched, we have capacity in the room to audit that idea, whereas one person doesn't bottleneck that space. The guy on our staff that is working in stage return to play also is within strength and conditioning. So you have multiple different lanes of thought whenever it comes up. I'm a big believer on making sure that people understand like how your role fits within the big picture. And having dual roles or dual credentials, I feel like definitely allows someone to operate in that space more effectively rather than just looking at this whole thing through the lens of I'm only sports science and I've only been sports science, and educate me about your space and strength and conditioning. I feel like that's much tougher to tread as an organization.
I really love the thing you mentioned in terms of internal auditing. I think that, having a collective of minds to be able to discuss certain things when it comes to how you guys program, how you guys track, how you guys monitor, how you guys bucket athletes, being able to have an extra set of eyes of people who are familiar with. So it's not just one person running the force decks, nor boards, catapult, whatever
Yep.
that you guys use. You have several people that can do it. And then it also gives you the ability, if one person's not available,
Yep.
for the next man to be up. So essentially everyone has the capacity to be able to do all of these different things.
No doubt.
Absolutely. What would you say your vision is for you going forward? I mean, obviously, you've gotten to one of the levels that many coaches aspire to get to. What would you say your personal goals are at this point? Obviously, winning
No
winning
doubt.
Super Bowls. I mean, I could tell you if
Yeah.
someone asked me, I want to win a championship
No
here.
doubt.
So, I mean, that's obviously where your feet are at. But what would you say your goals are for you?
Yeah, I mean, just to echo what you said, I'm obviously in it to win it. Like you do this, you play to win the game. So there's not as much we can affect as it relates to win and losses. As you talked about tactically on the field. But personally, I'll draw aspirations from my first mentor, Coach Kaz, who I mentioned multiple times on this podcast. I just want people that have worked with me or worked underneath me to have opportunities to grow as well. Like I'm huge for like staff growth. Like initially when you join the staff like us, like you're going to have an onboarding plan, you're going to have a 30, 60, 90-day plan in terms of success, but you're also going to have a growth plan. And for us, it's like, hey, I strongly encourage you at all points in this organization, you need to be either moving up or moving out. And what I mean by that is like you need to be taking on new roles and responsibilities and acquiring so much growth that I have to go upstairs and say, hey, this guy needs a title change. This guy needs more money. Or you need to start applying for some bigger jobs because you're strongly overqualified for the job you have. So I'm big on getting people in position to shine in areas that they specialize in. And then it really makes me feel good to see guys get head job interviews, to get director interviews, to go from assistants to directors, whether that be internally or other places. So I'm constantly trying to provide lanes of growth for people.
Gotcha. Any parting advice that you would have for the AAPCA community? We have a lot of coaches here that are trying to find their first jobs. Some of them, you have a lot of coaches that are getting into this. You have some that have been in this space for some time and don't necessarily feel like they've had the traction and movement.
Yep.
And then you have some that, are trying to basically break into different spaces. What would be your advice to those coaches?
Yeah. I would say obviously the networking aspect is critical, man. I'd say hustle, like, and I don't want to be myopic in saying that, but like I always had this fear that like somebody was out hustling me all the time. And it could be something as simple as like we got 2 weeks off and we're in Fort Lauderdale. Like who are coaches in the area? Like, is there a baseball team? Is there a football team? Is there a college team? Is there an NBA team? Like, hit them up on LinkedIn, find their Gmail. I've hit up 5, maybe 2 responded. I got a meeting with 1. You know what I'm saying? Like, you never know down the line where people are, and there's so much movement in this field. And your interaction with a person 3 years ago could be the same person you're sitting down in front of for an interview 3 years from now. Of like, oh, I remember you. You know what I'm saying? But that doesn't just come by accident. It doesn't just fall into your lap. Like I was constantly like DMing coaches, going asking, can I pop in? Can I come by and say what's up? I remember at the time when I was working my first internship, the girl I was dating went to school in Boston and I went to go visit her and I reached out to Boston College's head strength coach. Had no idea who he was, some guy named Frank. He was like, yeah, come on in. I come in, I shoot the shit with him, get to talking to him. This guy's a director of performance for the Patriots right now. You know what I mean? Like you never would know how that goes. Used
You
to be
never
like
know.
Titans. Yeah. So it's just building those networks and obviously I think before you put yourself in those situations, like make sure you've done the legwork on yourself. You know what I mean? Make sure you've done your research. Like I hate going into meetings cold. And what I mean by that is like if I'm going to network with somebody, I'm going to research them before. Who is this person? What are their values? What podcasts have they been on? Who have they worked with? What are their interests? What are their dislikes? That way, when I go into it, I feel like, hey, I've done my legwork going into this to make this a positive interaction rather than just going into this just being like, hey, whatever happens, happens. So I would just advise everyone just like there's always someone out there that's trying to out hustle you. And I learned that from my first internship with Coach Kaz, and it's kind of stuck with me as a principal from here on out. I still do it in the role that I'm in right now. Just trying to make sure you get in front of everybody and meet as many people as you can, because everybody at some point or another is a teacher for you.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. It's funny you say that because there's so much value in being a fly on the wall at times, and even a fly that comes to work. In my role when I was down at the JUCO, my first director role, I was at a JUCO in Mississippi, and I had an opportunity to cross the border a couple of days and go visit Rusty Witt. He was at Tulane. Shout out to Rusty,
Yes,
Coach
sir.
Rusty Witt. Now he's at Florida.
Florida. Yep.
And met the whole staff there. Shout out to Colin. Colin's now the director at Tulane. But that was just me saying, hey, I see this elite level program, heard about this coach. I want to see how they go do things. I want to see, I've always been, I guess, in my career, the type of person that goes and watches people cook, and I want to know what you put in your sauce.
No doubt.
And then eventually, I might take a little bit, make a couple adjustments, but as I'm putting my sauce together, I want to see what you do. I want to see how you run your program. I've gone and visited Exos, got a chance to see how they run things there. I just think it's so much value in what you're saying, and I appreciate you saying that, because I think that that's something that coaches, if you have an opportunity and you do have any downtime, which we don't always get, if you have a local coach, go visit, just see, hey, can I come just say what's up? And I just want to, if you don't want me touching anything, I just want to watch. I just want to learn, be a sponge and soak up what I can.
I think too, like watching podcasts like the ones we're on and just building out a Rolodex of like what you would call, let's say, special people, where this guy could be a fourth assistant on staff, but I heard him talk and I'm like, hey, this dude's moving. This guy's sharp. In 3-4 years, I wouldn't be shocked if he's somewhere else in a higher role, and just leverage that in terms of like, let me reach out to this person, not because of what they could be or where they are at. They could be a fourth assistant. They could be an intern, but let me talk shop with this guy. Let me figure out, what's his background, the same way you're asking me, and build a relationship with this dude. Like, hey, I saw you're running the internship program at Ohio State. Talk to me about how you put that together, because we're looking at doing one here. Sending out a Christmas card. Hey, happy holidays. You ever free, man? Stop by. Nice to meet you. Circling back around, having interest in that person, maybe giving them a follow. But like all that stuff kind of makes a difference in understanding like where the pieces are on the board. If you're just completely oblivious and unaware of that, it's tough to know where to direct your energy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Coach, I feel privileged and honored to have you here. Obviously, you and I will chop it up some more. But thank you so much for making time out of your schedule to come talk to us and to sew into the AAPCA podcast. Again, myself, I appreciate you taking your time out just to chop it up, man.
I appreciate you having me on, man, for real.
All right, man. Well, hey, if you guys also, I like to give everybody an opportunity. If people want to find you, people want to connect with you, what's the best way to connect with you?
I'm _ Coach Griffin on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not on Instagram that much. Obviously, you have my number if they know you and they want to reach out. I'm very accessible via text. I like to respond to all the texts that I get. So shoot me a text, get my number from you, and I'm an open book, man.
All right, man. Hey, appreciate you. Thank you for making the time out to schedule. And thank you guys for tuning in to the AAPCA podcast. We're going to be bringing some more people on, but we appreciate your time, and see you next time.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you. What's up? It's your boy, Larry Howard, Coach Proof, and I want to remind everybody that the African American Performance Coaches Association, AAPCA, is hosting its 4th annual AAPCA conference. This will be taking place Saturday, February 21st, 2026 at the Atlanta Marriott Northwest at Galleria in Atlanta, Georgia. This conference brings together top performance coaches, sports scientists, and strength and conditioning professionals from across the country for a full day of education, connection, and professional growth. You can expect high performance workshops, keynote speakers, leadership development, and vendor exhibits from some of the top brands in training and recovery. If you are serious about developing as a coach and expanding your network, this is an event you do not want to miss. You want to make sure that this is on your calendar. Again, Saturday, February 21st, 2026. Make sure you be there.